Ciphers of Time, Awakening the Legacy. Chapter 6, 6 months of training. Doctor, Manu began, his voice betraying none of the turmoil that churned inside him. I'd like to take my brother home. He glanced at the figure beside him, his brother's consciousness trapped in a borrowed vessel. This treatment isn't helping. Dr. Nagababu, a weary man weighed down by too many years of seeing too much suffering, looked from Shantanu's prone body to Manu's determined face. The lines etched into his forehead deepened as he sighed, the sound carrying the weight of resignation. I understand your frustration, Mr. Manu. Given the circumstances, I'll arrange for the discharge papers. He paused, his eyes lingering on the comatose patient. Are you sure you were prepared for this? More than staying here and watching him fade away, Manu replied, his gaze momentarily softening as he looked at Shantanu's unresponsive form. The doctor nodded grimly, motioning for a nurse to bring the necessary documentation. As signatures were etched onto paper, sealing Shantanu's fate outside these clinical walls, Manu felt a surge of protectiveness. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something vast and unknowable, and he was determined to shield his brother from the fall. Thank you, Doctor, Manu said. Once the formalities were concluded, Dr. Nagababu gave him a small, empathetic smile. Take care of him, Mr. Manu. Call if there's any change. We have arranged for our nurse to stay with him and provide full-time care. The doctor advised before departing. Manu turned to Shantanu, who seemed ill at ease in his temporary host. Ready to get out of here? He asked, more a statement than a question. Long past ready, Shantanu muttered, his voice sounding strange to Manu's ears, coming as it did from someone else's throat. Together they maneuvered the wheelchair through the maze of corridors, each turn taking them closer to uncertainty. As the automatic doors of the hospital slid open, admitting them to the world beyond, Manu felt the weight of responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. Whatever awaited them, he knew one thing for certain. The bond between brothers would be their guiding star. Manu steered the car through the crowded streets of the city, teeming with life, yet oblivious to the extraordinary circumstances he and his brother found themselves in. The afternoon sun glared off the windshield as they made their way to Shantanu's apartment, where his physical body lay inert, a shell awaiting the return of its spirit. As the elevator ascended, each of them was lost in thoughts of what had led them to this point. The call that had brought Manu rushing back from London, the accident that ensnared them in this mythological puzzle, and the unyielding mysteries that now dictated their existence. Once inside the apartment, Manu set about making arrangements while Shantanu sat by his own comatose form. It was an uncanny sight, one that would have seemed farcical under different circumstances. Nurse will be here from tomorrow, Manu announced after talking to the hospital over the phone. He turned to Shantanu, whose expression was distant and troubled. Hey, Manu said gently, sitting beside him. We'll figure this out, okay? We're together in this. Shantanu met his brother's eyes, and for a moment the barriers of confusion and fear fell away. I'm sorry, Manu, for how I acted when you left for London. I was a mess, and I took it out on you. There's nothing to apologize for. We were both dealing with a lot back then, Manu said, placing a reassuring hand on Shantanu's shoulder. Besides, we've had our share of good times too, remember? A ghost of a smile flickered across Shantanu's face. Like when we tried to cook Mom's recipe and almost set the kitchen on fire? Or when you convinced me to climb that mango tree and I ended up stuck there for hours. Manu chuckled at the memory, the tension in the room dissipating. Good times, Shantanu murmured, the warmth returning to his voice. They spent the next hour sharing stories, laughter mingling with the hum of the city outside, a balm to their weary souls. In those moments, the brothers found a glimpse of normalcy, a respite from the chaos that had become their lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its golden glow over the apartment, they knew that the road ahead was fraught with unknowns. They stayed up well past midnight, discussing various topics. Suddenly, Manu's gaze locked onto Shantanu's form, watching as his brother's eyes fluttered closed and his head lolled to one side. The transformation was swift. Shantanu's consciousness vacated, leaving behind an unwitting stranger in his place. What? Where am I? The man bolted upright, shock and fear contorting his features as he scanned the unfamiliar surroundings, his gaze finally resting on Manu. Manu was used to this by now. He spoke quickly, offering fragments of explanation, just enough to weave a plausible story, and said goodbye to the old Shantanu. With a final dubious glance, he allowed Manu to lead him out of the apartment, still muttering about lawyers and police as the door closed behind him. Manu leaned against the closed door, exhaling deeply. He checked his watch, then moved to the window, peering into the night, waiting for Shantanu's return. It wasn't long before a new person appeared outside, carrying the essence of his brother in yet another borrowed vessel. The new host body sauntered in, a lopsided grin on his face. Manu couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight, the tension draining from him. In turn, Shantanu chuckled, a sound that didn't quite match the stranger's visage. "Another one convinced you're a kidnapper?" Shantanu asked. "More or less," Manu replied, shaking his head. "Though I think he left believing I'm some kind of eccentric millionaire who throws elaborate parties that people can't remember attending." "Ah, the old Gatsby defense," Shantanu quipped. "Works every time." Their laughter filled the room once more, a fleeting reprieve from the chaos that had engulfed their lives. It wasn't long before they retired, surrendering to exhaustion, their shared humor a thin veil over the gravity of their plight. The morning brought with it the insistent ring of the doorbell piercing through the remnants of sleep. Shantanu, inhabiting his latest temporary shell, called out groggily, "Manu, would you get that?" But there was no response. "Manu?" Shantanu repeated, louder this time, as he pushed himself out of bed. With a knot tightening in his stomach, Shantanu shuffled towards the front door, the ringing now echoing in tandem with the quickening beat of his heart. Shantanu swung it open to reveal the nurse assigned to care for his comatose body, her brow creased with concern. "Hello, I am here to look after Shantanu," she said, confusion lacing her tone. "And Manu has called me saying that he is at police station and needs your help. He was unable to reach you." Shantanu's heart skipped. "I'll go right away, thank you," he replied, already moving past her, grabbing his jacket and keys as he went. His previous host body seemed to have taken his phone in their pocket last night. The world outside seemed to blur as Shantanu rushed to the station, the urgency of the situation propelling him forward. Upon arrival, he found Manu in a small interview room, looking disheveled but unharmed. "Manu, what on earth?" "Long story," Manu cut in, standing up. "I was discovered in a restricted area of the museum's archives, leaving everyone to wonder how I managed to bypass all their security measures. I must have appeared there during one of the jumps." "Okay, let's get you out of here," Shantanu said, turning to the duty officer. "There's been a misunderstanding." After a brief conversation and some paperwork, the brothers walked out into the muted light of early morning. The ordeal had shaken them both, but they kept their expressions neutral until they were safely back in the car. "Manu, we can't keep doing this," Shantanu said as they drove away from the station. "I know," Manu replied, running a hand through his hair. "We need to find a solution. Fast." Manu's fingers flew over the keyboard, the glow of the screen casting an eerie light in the dimness of his makeshift office. Beside him, Shantanu paced restlessly, his current host body exuding an aura of contained energy. "Here!" Manu clicked on a link, his eyes scanning the information rapidly. "This says something about old rituals, lost souls. It's vague, but might be connected to what we're experiencing." Shantanu leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the dense text. "Swamijis, do you really think they can help?" "Frankly, no," Manu admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. The rational part of him, the part honed by years of academic rigor, rejected the idea of seeking help from mystics. But then again, nothing about their predicament was rational. "But what other choice do we have?" "None," Shantanu sighed, running a hand through hair that didn't belong to him. "We're running out of options, and I'm tired of waking up in strangers' bodies." Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Manu closed his eyes briefly, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He couldn't leave his brother's real body lying in a coma while his consciousness hijacked unsuspecting individuals. And as today's police debacle had proven, Manu himself was now inextricably linked to this supernatural chaos. "Okay," Manu said finally, opening his eyes with newfound resolve. We'll approach these Swamijis. I don't believe in their methods, but we've seen enough to question our disbelief. Agreed, Shantanu nodded. Let's just hope one of them has a solution that stops me from hopping from body to body like some deranged spirit. Or worse, Manu added quietly, the fear of government labs and endless testing on their bodies sending a shiver down his spine. He is concerned about the possibility of being seen as test subjects if anyone were to find out about these anomalies. Then it's decided. Shantanu clapped Manu on the back, a gesture meant to instill confidence. We'll start first thing in the morning. First thing in the mornings, Manu echoed. Though sleep felt like a luxury they could no longer afford, they needed answers, and they would search every corner of myth and mysticism until they found them. The brothers, their hearts heavy with anticipation, began to approach the wise Swamiji one after the other. Seeking solace and guidance, they hoped for any clue that could shed light on their perplexing situation. The air was thick with a mix of uncertainty and hope as each brother presented their concerns to the venerable figures. Manu's heart pounded in his chest as another Swamiji, draped in saffron robes and adorned with rudraksha beads, chanted incantations that filled the dimly lit room with a resonance of mystery. Smoke curled from the small fire pit before them, carrying the pungent aroma of burnt herbs into the air. Shantanu sat beside him, his current host body's eyes half closed in trepidation. Done, the Swamiji announced with finality, dousing the flames with a concoction that hissed and spat. Your brother should now return to his physical form. They waited, the tension strung between them was palpable. Seconds turned to minutes, and still, Shantanu's host remained unchanged. Manu's shoulders slumped as the familiar sensation of defeat washed over him. Another failure, he whispered to Shantanu, who could only offer a frustrated glance. Let us try the last one on the list, Shantanu suggested with a reluctance that mirrored Manu's own. The fifth Swamiji, unlike the rest, lived in a humble abode nestled within the dense foliage of an ancient banyan tree. His demeanor was calm, his voice soft, yet carrying an undercurrent of authority. As they explained their predicament, the Swamiji listened intently, his eyes never leaving Manu's face. Yours is a predicament woven by threads unseen, entangled in the loom of time and karma. The Swamiji finally spoke, his tone grave. No ritual will untangle this knot. It requires understanding, discipline, and time. Time, Manu echoed, hope a faint flicker in his tired eyes. 6 months of dedicated training. I do not ask for payment. Your commitment to the process is the only currency I accept. 6 months, Manu repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He thought of Vimala, of his responsibilities, of the life he had built so carefully. I need to think about it. Think quickly, the Swamiji warned. Time, as you have already seen, is a fickle ally. With a heavy heart, they left the Swamiji's sanctuary, stepping back into the chaos of the world outside. Manu felt the weight of every step, each one a reminder of the decision that loomed over him. Let's grab some lunch, Shantanu said, attempting to inject normalcy into the surreal spiral of their lives. Though his appetite had long since abandoned him. As they walked toward the nearby street vendor, a sudden dizziness swept over Manu. His vision blurred, the sounds of the bustling streets amplifying around him. And then, everything went black. When appeared at new location, horns blared and tires screeched. Manu was standing in the middle of a busy street, disoriented, as a bus bore down on him. Instinctively, he leaped to safety, feeling the rush of air as the vehicle thundered past, missing him by inches. Are you insane? A passerby yelled, pulling him further onto the sidewalk. Sorry, Manu managed to gasp out, his legs trembling beneath him as he lost his consciousness. Manu, are you all right? Shantanu was there suddenly, gripping his arm. Yeah, Manu replied, though all right was a universe away from how he felt. Just another day in this madness. Shantanu nodded, his expression grim. We can't keep doing this. Manu knew he was right. They were out of spiritual advisors to consult, out of rituals to perform, and seemingly out of luck. The choice was clear, yet impossibly complex. Either he accepted the Swamiji's offer and upended his life for 6 uncertain months, or he continued this erratic existence, gambling with both their lives daily. Let's find somewhere quiet to sit, Shantanu suggested, guiding Manu away from the crowd. Somewhere quiet, Manu echoed, the irony not lost on him. Quiet was a luxury, one that, until they solved this curse, would remain forever out of reach. Shantanu's face was drawn with lines of worry and guilt, his brow furrowed, and his eyes filled with regret as he looked at Manu. His guilt is written all over his face, as he knows that this distressed state of Manu's is solely because he came to save him.